You're listening to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast, where I believe your relationship can be stronger than ever after having a baby. It just takes tools, conversation, and support to help you get there. I'm Chelsea Skaggs, certified life and relationship coach, mom of two, and survivor and thriver of tough relationship challenges after babies. I'm committed to helping couples just like you improve your communication skills, connection points, and personal confidence so that you can have the life and family you've always dreamt of. Now, let's get to today's episode. Hello, friends, parents, partners. Welcome back to the Better Relationships After Baby podcast. I'm super excited because I have a special guest with me.
Yes.
My husband, Mike.
And it's very good to be here. I'm excited about this.
We have been wanting to do some episodes together. And I wanted to dive into this topic because it's one that has been part of our conversation for a while. I mean, forever, probably. But it's come up a lot, I think, as we have a boy that is entering more boyhood and not, little kid, toddler years. We talk about this topic with our friends. We talk about this in reflection of the news and elections and movies we watch and shows we watch. Like, this topic comes up so much. So I wanted to have you here and ask you some questions about your experience with masculinity. That's the main topic here.
Right.
So again, we can touch on what society expects of men to what it feels like inside of our home, and hopefully unpack a little bit of that, give people, some language to work with, some questions to reflect on for themselves, and just like a little behind the scenes, like, we're with you. This is not like an easy breezy, perfect ride for us. We are constantly figuring out these big issues like this together. And I think, I am such a big advocate of the power of conversations and just continually growing together through that. So here we are to do it.
Here we are. No small topic.
Let's
just dive right in.
Let's start with the big picture here, and then we'll dial in.
Okay, sounds good.
When you think about how masculinity is portrayed in the society that we live in right now through media, social media, movies, politics, the news, the workplace, what stands out to you the most? Just that big picture of what masculinity is and means in our society.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't feel like there's a simple answer, only because I think masculinity is undergoing a change. I don't know that it had much transformation for decades, but probably in the last decade there has been some real question about what is masculinity and what is healthy masculinity, and there seem to be differing opinions. And so I think for the first time, there are people are some people are just unclear. What is masculinity? Where is society going to land on this? Where are my values going to bring me? And for other people, I think that maybe there is a little more clarity, just based on, I would think, based on what we've seen in the past. I feel like it was more acceptable to have sort of a widespread of masculinity or masculine posture or just how a man would carry himself. I felt like it was acceptable from from Die Hard movies, like that super macho masculine is what I'm thinking of, all the way down to like Mr. Rogers, like gentle masculine. And I don't feel like any of that was ever questioned, not like by major populace. I think it was just accepted that there's a wide range of what being a man can be. But now it has kind of come under the microscope, and there's been a lot of strong feelings, which I think lead to fracturing, like, oh, no, it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way. People start to choose and try to define it, which I don't know is always, it's not, I don't think that's necessarily bad to find definitions for things, but I think there's a sense of opposition present, which kind of makes it a little bit different. Does that make sense? Do you want me to be quiet? Is that what that face means? God.
Does that make sense? Feels so, I'm talking to a woman. Does that make, well?
Oh, no, I understand. I definitely did not mean it in that way. I ask men that. I make sure I'm coming at it from a place of humility, because I have a lot of times come in with like, this is the way it is. And then I think, like, I don't want to come across like a macho jerk.
I feel so tender because we're having this topic of a conversation. So everything feels a little elevated.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Like I'm like, well, are you insulting me by asking me if that makes sense because I'm a woman and I can't understand things? But then I also recognize that like as women, there's kind of, I don't know, I feel like there are these like underground rally cries of women, like, and one of them I think is like, stop asking people, does that make sense? Because you don't have, like, as a woman, that may sound like you don't have full confidence in what you're saying. Like, just
I
stop, like it's like an apology or a clarification.
Yeah.
So
I get what, and I didn't even think of it like that, but I appreciate you saying that. And I feel like, obviously, if the way I ask that comes across that way to more people, then I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
Right. Because my point, what I'm trying to convey is this. I just said a lot of stuff that made sense to me, but I'm not totally sure I said it in a way that makes sense to you. And I'm literally trying to like become smaller and admit that I may not be very good at saying this.
Yeah. And how interesting.
Right. Exactly.
That I felt like, let me take up my defense. Don't you insult me.
Right.
Like, that's the way I interpreted that.
Yeah.
And I became defensive. And so if we had not, I actually was like, oh, I'll just delete this from the podcast. But I actually think this is like super important.
Real life.
Because had we not gotten curious about one another's intentions in that exchange, I would have stayed defensive. And you would have been confused or, like,
yes.
And now we just worked through that and we're like, oh, cool. That was your intention and that was your experience. And now I understand more about you.
Yeah.
Cool.
High five.
High five. Let me get us back on track.
Okay.
Unless you have something
else.
No,
I think I might be able to close it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think today, though, it has become... It's become such a political issue. It's become such a cultural, unfortunately, kind of a culture conflict issue. And I think, a lot of that's going to be tied to some of these rights movements, for LGBTQ and transgender and some of these things that sort of the established old guard they're not comfortable with. And so I think from their perspective, they're probably thinking, hey, you're messing with the definitions of masculinity. And then they try to harden it. And I think that actually is a disservice to what masculinity is.
Yeah. Okay. That's huge because I initially thought like, well, hundreds of years ago, like not hundreds, like thousands in like the cavemen days, it's like, I man, I slaughter buffalo.
Yes. with club.
Boom. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, well, clearly there was much more defined and like much more emphasis on it back then. But I guess maybe there wasn't. Like maybe there, I don't know, maybe just over the years, people still felt different ways, but maybe it wasn't a cultural conversation. And now so many things.
Now there's a lot of pressure on the topic.
Yes.
To define it, I think.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, do you feel like there's like an ideal right now in our society in August 2024?
I don't even know if that's the right question. I mean, because I think that, you know, like what we had before, I don't think was bad. And obviously questioning and defining isn't necessarily bad either. I think there's probably some kind of a refinement happening. I think that we do have to challenge what traditional roles have meant. You know, I think it's just a bumpy road. And I think we will come to a place. I mean, I have my idea of what ideal masculinity is, but I know that isn't widely shared among everybody. I think, you know, in my mind, I hope that's what we all come to. But everybody probably thinks that too.
I'm not saying it's the alpha idea, the superior idea, but if everyone embodied it.
Yep. I know how that sounds. Yeah.
I was just thinking about, this is a time relevancy thing, but we just watched part of the Democratic National Convention last week, and Tim Walz's son was very emotional as he saw his dad. Yeah. And we saw a big divide, and I'm not asking you or I to be experts on this. I also want to just caveat that there are probably facts and things that we're not an expert on the political runnings right now. But there were criticisms, insults, making fun ofs that, you know, a teenage boy had this reaction.
Right.
And then there were celebrations and just like people maybe sharing a refreshed energy, seeing that. And I know how that conversation, you know, specifically just seeing exchanges online has impacted me, but I wonder how that exchange has impacted you, knowing that the debate is about how you're allowed to show up as a grown-ass man.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation. I mean, it has been a little bit ugly. Some of the mockery, I guess, and just making fun ofs that have been out there. I mean, that's ugly. And I see that coming from the far right politically. I'm not sure if there's been any from like the religious right. But, you know, that kind of brings me back to what we had talked about just a bit earlier. I think a boy could have done that probably 20 years ago and not been made fun of. I think it was almost like it was used as a political hit point, you know, which is unfortunate because, I mean, for one, why are we acting like that in the first place? Like, there are much better ways to get to common ends that are good for us. But I think I love that he felt proud of his dad, felt comfortable enough. And I understand he also may have had some developmental limitations of some kind. But honestly, none of that really matters, right? Everybody's different. And even if there were no detectable disabilities, still it's okay for someone to have those positive feelings in celebration of their dad. I mean, it's like breathtakingly
Yeah.
beautiful. Like if that were to happen to me, like
Mhm.
if I were the dad, I probably wouldn't be able to finish my speech. I mean, I would be proud. I'd want, to go
Yeah.
hug my son. I would be a proud dad for that to happen. That my dad would feel, or my son would feel so safe around me and so happy for my success, and I think it just shows that there's a love and a connection there and a safety there. And I like to make fun of that. I, I don't know. It's just, that doesn't end well. Like if you
Yeah.
follow that road, what does
Yeah.
that do to society? It's not good. Men need to be able to be gentle, right? In a world where, and I get like the far right kind of looks at masculinity, where I don't want to just be so one-sided or biased on this. I've seen images of masculinity on the far right side that for all intents and purposes are good, like well-intentioned. The man is strong. They will display him as able to do what needs done, right? To rise to the occasion, to, in some cases, kill to defend his family, and then turn around and be a gentle man in the home. Like I've seen that as an ideal on the right. Um, what we're kind of seeing now is like um, this hyper aggressive
Mm-hmm.
kind of masculinity showing up in spaces that are supposed to be safe spaces, and they're calling it masculinity. And I don't think that is again, that's not helping anything. But that I don't think there's honestly that big of a divide. I think what was modeled at the DNC was made to look like a democratic weakness.
Yeah.
But I think 20 years ago, the right would have, in a less politically divided time, I think the right, many of them would have said, oh, that's beautiful. That's,
Yeah.
Should we go to the next question?
I don't know. How are you
Yeah.
feeling? Do you still have more?
I mean, there's a lot to it. I think it's a symbol in our society right now that will have a fallout, good and bad. I want it to have more of a positive effect than a negative effect. And, I'm embarrassed. I'm mad. There are people that I feel like should know better.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like the whole world sees us, for one. And so like we look like one of those dramatic reality shows is what we've become as a country.
Go figure.
We watch too many reality shows. It melted our brains.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of focus in on the home. And I'm thinking about like how we do this in our home, but also how this may be impacting relationships and families. Just thinking about you interact with people on a daily basis of all different incomes and family types, like you are with a wide variety of people on a day-to-day basis. What do you see, or what do you think is the impact on those home relationships, on the marriage,
that's
on
a great question.
the kids? Maybe in section those out if it makes more sense.
Yeah,
like on the marriage first.
Yeah, let's just pick one thing.
Okay.
My thoughts aren't able to keep up with all that. No, I want to go off the last thing that we just said. There's some changes out in society that we have little control over and little influence over. It's important for us to sort of shine our light. Like if we feel like there's a better way than what we see, it's probably worth pointing out because someone probably needs to hear that. So I think that's valuable. But the big influence that we have is really not out there as much as it is in our homes. And there's a saying, I've heard it a few different ways, but it's like this idea of, if you want to change the world, change yourself, and you will have changed the most of the world that you have the power to change. And you've done your part, so to speak. And I think that applies. That applies here. I think that applies to fatherhood. I think, I think there should be a revival of like family, the value of family and those connections. But as far as what is happening out in the world, like these events and how they impact the home, there's a wide variety of responses out there, and some are extreme, some are subtle, and I think, unfortunately, there are people that sort of adhere to their political party and let it inform them on how to feel and live and be. Almost like that supersedes who they are. It like informs them of the kind of person to be, which is terrible because politics right now they're using techniques to get people to the polls. The most effective techniques are fear and division. Yeah. And, I hate to say it, but like, that's really what's happening. And if there's not some objectivity there, some space between you and your political party, I just feel like some people go mad. Yeah. They give their soul over to their party. I've heard people say things about like, how important it is to have a good relationship with your son and to be kind and to be a safe place. So I've heard people like, I think, just be sort of awakened to that. Yeah. And kind of gravitate towards their values and speak them. But on the other end, I've also seen some people that feel like they've got something to defend. And they want to make sure they're raising their kid to be masculine. And honestly, that's probably a bad idea. I think I'm not blaming people. I think there's kind of this rule I have: people are never the problem, because you will never solve it if people are the problem. It's always an idea, right? It's always something outside that's affecting people that you've got to solve. But I feel like just the climate of our politics right now has really, really had a negative impact for some people on their idea of masculinity.
Yeah. Okay. How, like, in what areas of marriage does your like self-perception on the masculinity scale impact, like, how does that impact our day-to-day marriage and how you see our relationship?
Yeah. That's a good question, because I feel like I've changed over the years. And I don't know if you've noticed, but in myself, I feel like I've changed quite a bit, probably in the last couple months. I had a lot of insecurity early in our relationship. You're probably hearing this for the first time. I mean, you are, but you may have known it.
All right, fair.
I had a lot of insecurity about needing to be more macho. And I'm not sure exactly if that came from you, if it came from society. There were some times that you came to me with an aggressive demeanor. Maybe you were working out or pumped up or something. And I was like, oh yeah, I gotta be a little more macho than she is. And I remember that, was a thing that happened a couple of times. But I think that is there. And I think it would have been better if I had not been insecure, because I made choices that were not true to who I am at my core. Right. So, but I think that's part of growing. It's part of learning. And now I feel a lot more in tune with what I feel like is my true nature,
Yeah.
including the natural masculine sort of makeup of my body, with its chromosomes and its
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to it, it's like biology, I think, in
Yeah.
some ways, but
How have I helped or hindered you? Probably both.
yeah, definitely.
In the last 12 years of, going from that, like, oh, let me prove my macho-ness, which, like, I totally get because
Mhm.
we've had this conversation. But on our honeymoon in, like, those first couple years, I felt like I had to be, like, hyper feminine, sexualized, like, prove myself as what I thought a
Oh yeah.
sexy new wife was, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, there were times where I'm like, oh, I'm trying so hard here, and it's exhausting. But you're just trying to do what you think
You're
you're
supposed to.
supposed to do, and it takes a lot to keep easing into one another, like
Yeah.
the safety of one another, enough to have that safety of just like continuing to shed the
Yeah.
layers of you've put on yourself.
Yeah. That's a really good way to say that. And I think it is just kind of demasking,
Yeah.
taking those layers off. I don't know what kind of change we've had over the past few months, but I do feel like I've been able to enter into a space where um, I can be more gentle.
Mm.
Um, and I always wanted that, especially when our kids were small. I mean, it's kind of complicated, but for some reason, um, I think the kind of masculinity I was trying to exercise did not allow me the space to also be gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And gentleness is such an important part of the masculine makeup. Like it's what makes the masculine safe. Without that gentle component, it's, I don't know if you could say it's easily harmful.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Do you know any specific factors that made that harder during that time? Like, say, when Emerson was young? Like, I'm wondering, was it like,
yeah, I think in a nutshell, life was difficult for
Yeah.
one. And so not sleeping well, we were fighting a lot, just because of the stress of everything.
yeah,
I was in sales, which is a super stressful job anyway. Um, and I felt like when I came to you with um, like pain or being worn down, looking for some kind of,
yeah,
I felt like the response I got was, "Hey, man up."
yeah, yeah,
And
it probably was.
so, and the truth of the matter was, I mean, it was just a difficult situation. And
Yeah,
so I felt like I do have to man up,
yeah,
like there's really no other option or a divorce,
yeah.
and
And then you still have to man up in a different way because, bitch, you learning how to do everything on your own 50% of the time.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah,
Or
please do.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how I don't like, I'm like, oh, how could we have done that better? Or how could
Mhm.
we have done that differently? And I think for me, there were times when I'm like, you are a grown ass adult and I have zero, like, you're going to survive on your own. And I have no extra energy, no extra empathy,
Mhm.
no extra patience. I am taking care of a child that, like,
Mhm.
can't freaking tell me what he needs, but he's screaming all the time,
Yeah.
won't sleep. So he's cranky. I'm not sleeping. Like, and
Yeah.
neither of us were getting what we needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than like having the luxury of like a live-in nanny, I don't know how we could do that differently.
Yeah. I agree. There were serious limitations of our own resources, of time, of sleep, of help. That's when I really came into the idea of like, wow, we need to go back to community, like close families and like people living together and supporting each other, because we didn't have the support. And I think that is literally just part of the outcome of that equation. Right now, there are probably skills that we could have applied and made that a lot better.
Right.
But we were still hitting bottom a lot with an empty tank.
Yeah. But I do want to say, I think we had like very mid-regular level support. Not
true.
I mean, there are so many, like we have good families.
Right,
we had,
people. It
It
felt like nothing because we still needed more, but you're right. There wasn't nothing. There was some.
And there are people, like I just want to say to those who don't have extra hand support, grandma stepping in, like
we see you.
Yes.
And those skills.
We see you. And I think the thing is, the awakening and the understanding that you need more skills for the relationship than you did before. And some people are going to have the capacity to develop those a lot more quicker than other people. But that is why, I mean, I am passionate about this work, because when you start to open up to developing new skills in the conversations, like at whatever pace that happens, it's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, for me, manning up in that time was, is it okay to go back to this? Okay.
Please.
Wasn't all bad. I mean, I did become more focused, more determined. What was not healthy was there was a lot of negative self-talk that began. And I think actually that's probably what led to me not being able to be gentle, because I didn't have room to be gentle with myself, and I didn't have any capacity for, that the kids, obviously we were gentle with them, but I just remember not being as gentle as I wanted to be, just getting so easily frustrated. And so.
Okay, we've covered a lot. I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about. So I'm like totally happy to do this again. But I do want to kind of come to a wrap up place. And I think I want to ask you, how do you see yourself as a model of masculinity for our kids?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to be that cat?
I know, that cat is crazy right now.
What does it mean to be a parent?
Yeah.
I mean, to a boy and a girl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right now we have
yeah.
strongly identifies as a boy, strongly identifies as a girl. How do you parent and think about your experience with masculinity?
Yeah, I love that question. And this is something I roll around in my head often, being in the role that I'm in. And I think there's a lot of answers there. I mean, that there's a lot of practical things to look at. There are sort of matters of the heart, I think, that are also important. Like as far as practical, I know that we need to live in a world where men are safer for women than they have been.
Yeah.
I am astonished to learn some of the statistics on sexual abuse, rape. I mean, it is mind-blowing to me. Like, obviously I was aware of that being happening in the world, but the sort of percentages are just shocking. And something has to be done. Something's not right there and not healthy. But I think my mom was really good at teaching me how to respect women. And so I think that really I'm just passing that on to Emerson. I don't know. I don't know that I had the most perfect masculine role models. My dad was fairly absent, mostly absent. And then my stepdad, it just wasn't a strong dad relationship. He was great, but a lot of times it was just, he felt more like a big brother. And so I think for me, this might sound goofy, but like the best impressions I've seen of good dads, I feel like I've sourced them from things I've seen outside of my own home. Right. Um, and I think that in terms of what makes a society flourish, right, that's how do you define masculinity within those terms? And I think that means men are strong and they're safe, um, powerful but gentle. Like I think that's, and those are stereotypes too. I think, but I want Emerson to know he has a responsibility um, as a man, as he grows into becoming a man. And to be honest, I feel like I'm going to learn so much between now and the next 10 years. I just want him to know like that he can have a healthy relationship with me. I think that's so valuable. And that kind of brings us back to the Tim Walls thing. I mean, like, I think most dads would just love to have a loving, safe relationship with their sons and kids, all the way around. But yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. And I would feel so honored if that were Emerson at that age, and I was speaking. So
cool. Well, I mean, we are on our own journey of creating our home environment where masculinity and femininity are allowed to, be flexible. We're learning with them. But I'm really glad that they have a dad that values learning and self-growth and curiosity. And, you do a really great job of giving them opportunities to speak or share or just be really safe with you. And I don't think I could ask for anything better than that. And me too. Sometimes I'm a gentle flower and sometimes I'm a gentle, fragile bomb,
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of
A
both.
delicate bomb.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Anything else you want to share or
No, I
on your
think this
mind?
was good. Yeah,
Okay.
I enjoyed this.
Will you do it again?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And I hope my answers weren't too long. I tried to keep them short, but I don't think I did a good job of that.
I think it's probably perfect. All right. Well, I would also love to hear your thoughts on this topic, like how you're seeing masculinity play out in your home and in your life and where that's coming from, whether it's media or family or your small town you live in, whatever that is. So let me know. Let us know in the comments on the podcast or over on Instagram. And if this is something you want to explore or talk about more, find that link down in the show notes to schedule a call with me. And we can talk about how this is playing out in your relationship or just for you in general. So until next week, take care. Love you. If no one's told you, the shit is hard, but you are a person that's here committed to growing and learning and evolving. And for that, you are doing a If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you take a minute to help spread the word. As a small business owner, shares and reviews go a long way. So share this episode with a friend, share it on your social media, and please leave a review if you haven't done so.
This helps these messages get to more mamas, and you guys, that's how we change the world.